On a little more near-term weather and climate, we now have Art Horn. Art has been a climatologist, meteorologist for NBC TV, CBS TV. He has won an Emmy for a production on television. He now is an independent lecturer, writer, and production person in the weather field, and it will be exciting to hear his comments. Art?
Thank you. Thank you very much. How do I get out of this? That was easy. Is it gonna? I'm better with mouse, the old-fashioned. Voila. Yeah, this talk is about prediction. You know, I did television for 25 years and never missed a forecast. What predicting the weather on a daily basis teaches you is that, yeah, you're going to blow some. You know, you learn the fallibility of prediction, and that's what this program is basically about. I really like this. There's no opinion, however absurd, which men will not readily embrace as soon as they can be brought to the conviction that it is generally adopted. Does that sound familiar to global warming? Now, this is Dwight Eisenhower's farewell speech to the nation on January 17th, 1961. It's a little long, but I'm going to slug through it. It says, "Today, the solitary inventor tinkering in his shop has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the Free University, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research." And you've all heard this before. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet, in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become a captive of the scientific technological elite. It was like he could see the future. Let's see, that doesn't belong there. Okay, let's see, we seem to be out of order here. Let's see. Well, I guess, yeah, because this is not in the, well, wait a minute, maybe if I go backwards. This is, yeah, it's just backwards, like a lot of things. So we've seen what's happened to organizations like the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. All these organizations have become in a sense, a captive of a technological elite. This is the Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York, and what struck me about this is that below this, there's a very interesting little restaurant. Recognize this? It's the Seinfeld restaurant, right below the Goddard Institute for Space Studies. It was a show about nothing. However, in this show, GIS is making something from nothing. They are inventing and reinventing temperature. It's true man-made global warming. I'm sure in some of the presentations you saw how Mr. Hansen has been cooling the past, the 30s, and warming the present, also warmed the past to straighten out the temperature trend and give us a more alarming-looking profile. As I say, if this cooking of the books were done in the corporate world, the penalty would be jail time. The American Meteorological Society, the American Physical Society have been, are now strident global warming advocates because they know where the money is. And it's true in television, too. Programs on the Discovery Channel, the Science Channel, the National Geographic Channel, which is the worst, all use global warming scare tactics to try to generate revenue. Time magazine, in their last spring's extinction issue, said there were only 25,000 polar bears left, and we know, of course, that represents a huge increase in their population. And even Sports Illustrated has gone the global warming route because they think it can generate sales. And of course, we all know about what's happening with the carbon financial products, their potential, maybe the biggest tradable commodity ever invented. And of course, all these environmental groups are looking for donations using global warming as their hook. They all predict it's going to get warmer in the future. Well, this book caught my eye. It's called When Prophecy Fails. It's by Leon Festinger, University of Minnesota Press, 1956, a social and psychological study of a modern group that predicted the destruction of the world. In the book, Festinger points out that those who believe strongly about an issue share common threads. He writes, the belief must be held with deep conviction, and it must have some relevance to action. The person holding the belief must have committed himself to it. That is, for the sake of his belief, he must have taken some important action. The more important those actions are, the greater the individual's commitment to the belief. President Obama said on September 22, 2009, no nation, however large or small, wealthy or poor, can escape the impact of climate change. Rising sea levels threaten every coastline. More powerful storms and floods threaten every continent. More frequent droughts and crop failures breed hunger and conflict in places where hunger and conflict already thrive. On shrinking islands, families are already being forced to flee their homes as climate refugees, he said. The security and stability of each nation and of all peoples, our prosperity, our health, and our safety are in jeopardy. And the time we have to reverse this tide is running out. And of course, that all is leaning towards the cap and trade policy. Our buddy, Mr. Gore, and his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, was a big commitment to this whole phenomenon. Now, Al is great because he gives us so many great blunders. This one, on the inside cover of his new book, shows a southern hemispheric hurricane off the coast of Florida. That is impossible. It can't happen. You would think he would notice that. And he's predicting, of course, massive floods. The real inconvenient truth, of course, is that he is not a scientist. After all, he said, the Earth's interior has a temperature of several million degrees. That was what he said to Conan O'Brien on The Tonight Show this winter. Of course, if this were true, the Earth would be a small star. He lacks the most elementary facts of science. The real temperature, of course, is several thousand degrees. This is a quote from Dennis Miller on O'Reilly's show, and it said, beware the prophet seeking profit. Now, in the book, Festinger also points out that the belief must be sufficiently specific and sufficiently concerned with the real world so that events may unequivocally refute the belief. Failed predictions. This is going to be an example of the many failed predictions. As I know from predicting weather on television, making predictions is easy. Having them come true is hard. For instance, if present trends continue, the world will be about 4 degrees colder in 1990, but 11 degrees colder by the year 2000. That was ecologist Kenneth Watt from UC Davis on the first Earth Day in 1970. Kind of blew that one. Global warming could force Americans to build 86 more power plants at a cost of $110 billion to keep all their air conditioners running 20 years from now, a new study says. Using computer models, researchers concluded that global warming would raise average annual temperatures nationwide by 2 degrees by this year. That was in the Associated Press, May 15, 1989. We know that that obviously has not happened. Warming Arctic climate, melting glaciers faster, raising ocean level, scientists say. A mysterious warming of the climate is slowly manifesting itself in the Arctic, engendering a serious international problem. Dr. Hans Alman, noted Swedish geophysicist, said today in the New York Times, May 30th, 1937. Civilization will end within 15 to 30 years unless immediate action is taken against problems facing mankind. We are in an environmental crisis which threatens the survival of the nation and of the world as a suitable place for human habitation. Barry Commoner, Washington University, Earth Day, 1970. In the next 50 years, fine dust that humans discharge into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels will screen out so much of the sun's rays that the Earth's average temperature could fall by 6 degrees. Sustained emissions over 5 to 10 years could be sufficient to trigger another ice age. Washington Post, July 9th, 1971. In 1988, Dr. Jim Hansen predicted this for New York. Well, there'll be more traffic. The West Side Highway will be underwater, and there will be a tape across the windows across the street because of the high winds. And the birds, the same birds won't be there. The trees in the median strip will change. There'll be more police cars. Well, you know what happens when the crime when the temperature goes up. More than 20 years later, the traffic is the same. The West Side Highway is not underwater. There's no tape on the windows due to high winds. The same birds are there. The trees are the same. There are the same number of police, and crime has gone down. Everything he predicted was wrong. By 1995, the greenhouse effect would be desolating the heartland of North America and Eurasia with horrific drought, causing crop failures and food riots. By 1996, the Platte River of Nebraska would be dry, while continent-wide black blizzards of prairie topsoil will stop traffic on interstates, strip paint from houses, and shut down computers. The Mexican police will round up illegal American migrants surging into Mexico seeking work as field hands. This is from the book Dead Heat, The Race Against the Greenhouse Effect, Michael Oppenheimer and Robert Boyd, 1990. In fact, there was no black blizzard, there was a flood instead. A senior climate scientist predicted this 10 years ago. According to Dr. David Viner, a senior research scientist at the Climate Research Unit of the University of East Anglia, within a few years, winter snowfall will become a very rare and exciting event. Children just aren't going to know what snow is. Baltimore had 80 inches of snow this winter. Washington, D.C. had 56. That broke a record of 54.5 set in the winter of 1898-99. Wilmington, Delaware had over 66 inches. Philadelphia, a new record of 71.5, and Atlantic City, 50. All of those are new records. We know the basic warming stopped around 1998, and there, according to where you pick your point, there may have been a slight cooling since then. We know that the great fingerprint in the sky, the warm hot spot, is not there. The fingerprints do not match. We know that satellite measures show more heat has been escaping to space, not less. This means there has been no increased greenhouse effect as predicted by computer models. That research by Dick Lindzen. Today there are an estimated 25,000 polar bears. We know the ice in the Arctic has been increasing. We had a record large expanse of ice in 2007. The Argo floats show us that ocean heat content has been decreasing. Tornadoes are not getting more severe. Since the 70s, the number of severe tornadoes has been going down. We look at the accumulated cyclone energy index for hurricanes around the world, and we see that the energy levels have actually been going down since 1993. So many global warming predictions have failed that the concept had to be changed to something more general to maintain any credibility. Global warming, of course, is now climate change. Now any weather event is covered by this catch-all phrase. If you predict that climate change causes everything, you can't be wrong. It would be very interesting for me to go out on television and say, tomorrow we're going to have a hurricane, a tornado, a heat wave, and a blizzard. Even though this is a quite cold winter by recent standards, it is still perfectly consistent with predictions for global warming, said Dr. Miles Allen, head of the Climate Dynamics Group at the Department of Physics, University of Oxford. All of these organizations were predicting warmer temperatures, increasing drought, less snowfall, increasing heat waves, accelerating sea level rise, stronger hurricanes, and much, much more. Well, they haven't happened. And now global warming skepticism is on the rise among the general population because they're starting to see all of these failed predictions. The theory of man-made global warming is crumbling. This is a powerful threat to the anthropogenic global warming believers and interests. The response will not be realization of fact. It will be an even more hysterical and fervent reaffirmation that the theory is correct and that global warming is accelerating. In the book, Fenzinger states, it is unlikely that one isolated believer could withstand the kind of disconfirming evidence that has been specified, what we have seen in the real world. If, however, the believer is a member of a group of convinced persons who can support each other, the belief can be maintained, and the believer may attempt to persuade non-members that the belief is correct. In a recent edition of Science magazine in March, on the 10th, the editorial said, the fundamental understanding of the climate system, although far from complete, is stronger than ever. Far from complete equals almost nothing. So if you say the fundamental understanding of the climate system, although almost nothing, is stronger than ever. So stronger than almost nothing is still almost nothing. Al Gore, our climate savior, has said, "I'm offering you the choice of life or death." That from his new book. Another claim that is more extreme. Here is the climate forecast for the next decade from the Met Office in England. Although global warming will be held in check for a few years, it will come roaring back to send the mercury rising before 2014. Clearly, if we burn all fossil fuels, we will destroy the planet we know. We would set the planet on a course to the ice-free state, with sea level rising 246 feet higher. Climate disasters would occur continually. That was Jim Hansen from The Observer, February 15th, 2009. In the late 1980s, when I began to take climate change seriously, we referred to global warming as a slow-motion catastrophe, one we expected to kick in perhaps generations later. Instead, the signs of change have accelerated alarmingly. Really? Climate change is causing a breed of wild sheep in Scotland to shrink. According to research, scientists say milder winters help smaller sheep to survive, resulting in this paradoxical decrease in size. This is called grasping at straws. The North Polar ice cap is melting so fast. But what seems to me to be important is that some of the effects we are witnessing now are happening twice as fast as the scientists were predicting just 5 years ago. He hasn't looked at the Arctic ice anomaly. A thaw of Iceland's ice caps is coming in the coming decades, caused by climate change, may trigger more volcanic eruptions by removing a vast weight of freed magma from deep below the ground. An Icelandic volcanologist, but the volcanologists I've talked to say that it's the magma chamber below which dominates everything. Climate modelers say if we enforced all pollution laws on vehicles and industry, the rate of global warming will double to 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit per decade by 2030, Journal of Climate Dynamics 2010. Double from what? I guess the modelers haven't heard global warming stopped a decade ago. Ecocide is a very interesting concept that's been introduced. The extensive destruction, damage, or loss of ecosystems of a given territory, whether the human agency or by other causes, to such an extent that peaceful enjoyment by the inhabitants of all that territory has been severely diminished. It could be used to prosecute climate deniers who distort science and facts to discourage voters and politicians from taking action to tackle global warming and climate change. A British lawyer turned campaigner, Polly Higgins. That's a scary thing. Satellite sensors, ocean floats, and other instruments are inadequate. They can't find the missing heat that may be building in the climate system. The reprieve we've had from warming temperature in the last few years will not continue. The heat will come back to haunt us like the boogeyman in the closet. We're at a stage where the warming is happening at a much faster rate. People are going to say, my God, we are going to have to take action much faster than planned. Ranjendra Pachauri, the chairman of the IPCC, apparently he doesn't look at real-world data. So don't be surprised if you hear more and more outrageous predictions about what the effects of global warming will be. The careers and ambitions of politicians, bureaucrats, environmental groups, Wall Street brokerage houses, and corporations are all on the line. Like a wounded animal, the global warming interests will fight even harder as the death of the theory draws near. Thank you very much.